They said the land smelled of pine and rain, a place where the wind carried no memory of kings or wars. Yet when Samuel stepped ashore that morning, he felt both the beginning and the ending of something deep inside him. The river beyond the pines. The year was 1672, and dawn unrolled over the Atlantic like pale, bold cloth. The ship that had carried them for 6 hard weeks drifted toward the unknown coast, its sails heavy with salt and prayer. From its worn deck stepped Samuel Whitford, a young man from Dover, England, clutching a leather satchel that held his father's letters and a half-faded map. Before him stretched Virginia, green, wide, and breathing. The forest met the sea in a long hush of mist and cedar. Behind him, the ocean sighed like an old mother, letting go of her children. His boots sank into the soft sand. The first sound he heard on the new continent was birdsong mixed with human wonder. All around, settlers moved with quiet purpose, unloading barrels, stacking crates, setting fire to damp kindling. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp scent of pine sap. Samuel stood still a moment, listening. He thought of his mother's last words. Find the river your father dreamed of, the river beyond the pines. They built a rough camp near the tree line. Canvas shelters flooded, and a single flag hung limp above them. Samuel worked beside Elias Carter, a gray-bearded farmer who spoke little but smiled often. This land, Elias said, tying rope around a fallen trunk, it watches you back. You'll feel it. Samuel nodded. And what should a man do when the forest stares? Elias chuckled softly. Listen, it's older than we are. By nightfall, small fires dotted the shore. The settlers huddled close, warming hands, trading stories to keep fear away. Someone hummed a hymn. Someone else cried quietly into his sleeve. The forest beyond the light waited in silence, vast and unknowable. When darkness thickened, strange sounds began. A slow rustle of branches, a hollow knock like distant drumming. Elias crossed himself. The land speaking, he murmured. Best not answer until it knows our names. Samuel could not sleep. He lay beside the dying fire, watching embers blink out one by one. The stars above him felt near enough to touch. He thought of England, of narrow streets, of his father's voice telling tales of a new world where a man might breathe free. His father had vanished on such a voyage years ago. Now Samuel walked inside that unfinished story. Restless, he rose before dawn and followed the thin trail of moonlight through the trees. The air smelled of moss and rain. Somewhere ahead, he heard the faint murmur of moving water. Pushing through reeds, he found it. A small river, clear and steady, winding between stones slick with silver light. He knelt and touched the surface. The cold bit into his skin, real and alive. I found it, Father. The river beyond the pines. For a heartbeat, the forest seemed to breathe with him. A breeze moved through the branches, and the mist shifted. Across the stream, half hidden in shadow, stood a figure. Tall, still, watching. He blinked. The shape was gone. Only the soft rush of the river remained. He stayed there until the first color of morning touched the water. Then he rose, heart quiet, and walked back to camp. Behind him, the river whispered through the trees, carrying his words away to somewhere unseen. He did not know it yet, but that small stream would soon bind the settlers to the land in struggle, in faith, and in memory for generations to come.
Chapter 2. The First Winter. The autumn sun lingered softly that year, casting the forest in shades of honey and smoke. The settlers' small camp had grown into a cluster of wooden cabins by the bay, stitched together with patience, sweat, and the steady rhythm of hammers on pine. For a while, it almost felt like home. The air was thick with the smell of bread baking on open fires. Children laughed as they chased each other between the half-built fences. At dusk, Samuel would sit near the river, his river, and listen to the water slip through the reeds. Each evening, he whispered a small prayer into its current, a conversation with his father carried downstream into the unknown. But by the time the leaves began to turn, the forest changed. The wind shifted from warm to sharp, and the light no longer lingered. Game grew scarce. The settlers noticed how quiet the woods had become. No birds at dawn, no deer at the edge of the field. Only the steady creak of trees bending beneath invisible weight. Elias Carter said it first. "The land's testing us." By late November, frost covered the roofs like lace. The settlers gathered what they could: salted fish, corn, the last of the dried berries, and sealed the rest in barrels. A fever took 3 of the children, and the sea, once a friend, turned violent and gray. Samuel kept a journal that winter, though the ink often froze before he could finish a page. December 3rd, 1672. The wind sounds like it is alive. It moves through the trees and hums against the walls as if it were trying to speak. Elias says it's only the cold. I'm not sure. Sometimes it feels like the forest remembers every step we take. Inside the cabins, men coughed through the nights, while women prayed over candlelight. They spoke softly of England, of warm bread and cobblestone mornings, as though saying the words might bring warmth to their hands. Still, there were moments of quiet grace. Samuel and Elias would walk the riverbanks when the weather allowed, their boots crunching through snow. The river had frozen along its edges, but its center still moved, slow and alive, like a vein beneath ice. "This is it," Elias said one morning, staring at the water. "This river's why we came, whether we knew it or not." Samuel smiled. "You think it will carry our names one day?" Elias looked at him with tired eyes. "If we survive this winter, lad, maybe it will carry more than that." That night, Samuel dreamed of his father. He stood by the same river, though the trees were different, older, thicker, almost black against the sky. His father said nothing, only pointed downstream. When he woke, the cabin door had swung open, and a thin layer of snow covered the floor. Outside, dawn was pale and soundless. He followed the dream's pole, walking toward the forest, his breath rising in faint clouds. The air was colder than before, the kind that burns your lungs when you breathe. He found something strange near the bend of the river, a circle of stones perfectly shaped as though laid by human hands. In the center, small twigs had been arranged in a spiral. No footprints led to or from it. When he told Elias, the old man frowned. He said, "Could be the natives, could be something older." The settlers knew there were people beyond the woods, tribes who watched them from the shadows but never came close. Once they found a bundle of herbs tied to their doorposts. Elias believed it was a gift, a sign of peace. Others feared it was a warning. As the days shortened, food dwindled. One by one, the fires in the cabins grew smaller. The settlers learned the taste of hunger, how it made a man quieter, slower, more thoughtful. Yet even in their weakness they did not leave. Something in the land, something unspoken, held them there, In January, the first thaw came unexpectedly. The snow melted in thin rivulets, and the air smelled briefly of pine and earth again. Samuel stood by the river and watched the ice break apart, listening to the soft crack and sigh of the water beneath. He took out his father's map. The ink faded nearly beyond reading. There was a line drawn in his father's hand from the coast inward, ending at a small mark shaped like a star. Beneath it, one word: peace. That night, he showed it to Elias. "You think it's real?" the old man asked. I think he believed it was. Elias looked at the map for a long moment. Then maybe that's reason enough. When spring finally came, it arrived not with fanfare, but with birdsong. The first green leaves unfurled as forgiveness. The settlers, thin but alive, gathered beside the river to give thanks. Samuel dipped his hands into the cold water and smiled faintly. The forest no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like something watching, yes, but also waiting to see if they were worthy of staying.
Chapter 3: The Hidden Map. Spring unfolded slowly that year, like a wounded bird learning to fly again. The snow melted into the soil, filling the rivers, feeding the roots. By April, the settlers' fields were alive with young shoots of corn and barley, the first true color they had seen in months. Children ran barefoot again, and the laughter that winter had stolen returned like a long-lost song. Samuel spent his mornings by the river, sketching the curves of its flow into his father's faded map. The parchment, yellowed with salt and time, had become his most sacred possession. The star mark, the one labeled peace, seemed to sit just beyond where the ink had faded. He traced it each day, wondering what lay past the forest's reach. Elias often joined him, leaning against a tree with his pipe, smoke curling into the green air. "You're still chasing ghosts," he said one afternoon, smiling gently. "Maybe," Samuel replied. "But if my father drew this, he must have seen something." Elias nodded, looking toward the distant hills. "Or maybe he wanted you to see it." As the days grew longer, a quiet curiosity stirred in the settlement. Hunters began venturing deeper into the woods. They spoke of clearings where the trees grew in strange patterns, and of stone formations shaped like hands reaching toward the sky. The forest, though less cruel now, still carried its mystery. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a group of traders arrived from another colony up the coast. Their leader, a tall man named Renfield, carried with him a sack of trinkets, iron nails, dried tobacco, glass beads. Over the fire that night, he told stories of his travels, of native tribes who spoke of a river that remembers. Samuel's heart stirred. "What do they say of it?" he asked. Renfield took a long sip of ale before replying. "They say it runs through land no man dares to settle. The trees there move when no wind blows. Animals won't cross it. But they also say those who listen long enough at its banks hear voices, old ones." Elias laughed softly. "Sounds like superstition." "Maybe," Renfield said, eyes narrowing. "But maybe superstition is just history with its tongue cut out." The fire crackled between them. Samuel looked down at his map, the faint line that curved inland toward that same invisible river. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but recognition. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. The wind outside was soft, full of frog song and the rustle of new leaves. He unrolled the map again by candlelight, tracing his father's inked path. Under one of the lines, barely visible, he noticed a faint impression, as if something had been written and later erased. He held it closer to the flame. The light revealed a hidden word, faint but legible. Follow the stones. His pulse quickened. He remembered the circle of stones he had found during winter, the one by the river bend. Could it be the beginning of his father's trail? At first light, he went to find Elias. The old man listened carefully as Samuel spoke, then rubbed his beard thoughtfully. If your father marked that, he meant something by it. The stones might lead somewhere, or nowhere, but I suppose it's better than waiting here for another storm. By midday, they packed provisions, bread, salted meat, a small compass, and the map, and left the safety of the settlement. The forest greeted them with the same whispering calm as before. Sunlight slipped through the canopy like strands of gold, and the air smelled of moss and distant rain. They followed the river upstream for miles until the path narrowed and twisted between great walls of pine. Then, just as Samuel had remembered, they found it, the circle of stones, half buried beneath ferns. In its center, something new, a single white feather resting on the ground. Elias frowned. That wasn't here before. Samuel crouched, touching the feather gently. It was clean, unweathered, as though placed that very morning. Someone's been here, he whispered. Beyond the stones, the ground sloped upward. The underbrush grew thick, tangled, and strangely silent. No birds called, no insects hummed, only the sound of their footsteps crunching against damp soil. After an hour of climbing, they reached a ridge that overlooked a wide valley. Through the trees below, they saw it, a second river, broader and darker than the one near their settlement, winding deep through the land like a secret vein. Its water shimmered oddly, almost metallic in the fading light. Samuel stared in awe. The river beyond the pines. Elias exhaled, long and low. Your father wasn't chasing a myth after all. They made camp on the ridge that night. The stars burned clear above, the forest quiet as a cathedral. Samuel lay awake listening to the faint rush of the hidden river below. For the first time since leaving England, he felt something stir in his chest, not peace, but purpose. He thought of his father's voice, the promise of the map, and the lives waiting back at camp. The land was no longer just soil and trees. It was alive, watching, remembering. Somewhere out there, his father's footsteps might still echo, and Samuel, guided by faith and blood, was finally walking beside them.
Chapter 4. Voices of the River. Morning came like a whisper. Mist clung to the trees, soft and silver, and the valley below shimmered beneath a veil of dew. Samuel and Elias broke camp in silence, their breath clouding in the cool air. The sound of the river, deep, low, constant, guided them through the forest. They descended slowly, careful not to slip on the wet earth. As they moved closer, the noise grew louder, not violent, but steady, like a voice speaking in another language. When they reached the bottom of the ridge, the trees parted to reveal the hidden river in full. It was unlike any water they had seen. The surface gleamed with faint colors, green, bronze, and blue, as though reflecting light from beneath rather than above. Long strands of grass drifted in the current, swaying like fingers. On both banks, tall pines leaned inward, their roots twisting into the soil as if guarding something ancient. Elias whistled softly. No wonder the natives keep away. Samuel stepped closer. It's beautiful. The air smelled different here, not of salt or wood smoke, but of something old and clean, like rain trapped in stone. He knelt at the edge, dipping his hand into the water. It was cold enough to sting, yet when he lifted his palm, no droplets clung to it.
The skin was dry. Elias frowned. That's not natural. Samuel stared at his hand, then back at the river. Beneath the surface, he thought he saw movement, faint shapes swirling, too slow to be fish, too graceful to be debris. Maybe it's the minerals, he said quietly, though even as he spoke, he didn't believe it. They followed the riverbank eastward, noting landmarks, a forked oak, a fallen log, the skeleton of a deer long picked clean. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest became. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Then they saw it, another circle of stones, larger than the first, moss-covered, half-sunken and old, impossibly old. In the center stood a single wooden post, gray and weathered, carved with markings neither man recognized. Elias brushed a hand across it. Writing, maybe? Samuel shook his head. Not like any I've seen. The carvings were smooth and shallow, spiraling down the post in patterns that seemed almost rhythmic, as if meant to be read aloud or sung. He felt a strange pull in his chest, a quiet hum beneath his ribs echoing the shape of the pattern. Without thinking, he reached for the post and pressed his palm against it. The forest exhaled. For a moment, everything, the air, the river, even the light shifted. The sound around them faded into a single tone, low and deep, like a breath drawn by the earth itself. "Samuel!" Elias's voice broke the spell. "What did you do?" Samuel stepped back, heart pounding. I don't know." Then came the sound. From across the river, faint at first, a whisper rose. It wasn't the wind. It was layered, many voices overlapping, speaking too softly to understand, but too human to ignore. The sound rippled along the water, echoing between the trees until it surrounded them completely. Elias gripped his arm. "Tell me that's just the current." Samuel couldn't answer. His throat was dry, his body trembling with something that wasn't fear, not yet, something closer to awe. The voices continued, rising and falling like waves. Then, for a heartbeat, they formed a word, clear, familiar, peace. The same word marked on his father's map. Samuel froze. His eyes met Elias's, and neither spoke. The river shimmered again, brighter now, casting reflections that danced up the trunks of the trees. After a long silence, the sound faded. The air returned. The forest once again was only forest. Elias exhaled slowly, pulling his hat from his head. "I think we've heard enough for one day." But Samuel stepped closer to the edge, staring into the current. He felt certain the voices weren't meant to frighten. They had called to him, gently, almost welcoming. He turned to Elias. "This is it. My father must have found this place. The river remembered him." Elias sighed. "And what if it remembers others too? The ones who never came back?" They built a small fire by the shore that night. The moon hung high above, pale and distant. Samuel sat awake long after Elias had fallen asleep, watching the river glow faintly in the starlight. He thought of his father, of his ship lost to the sea, of the letters filled with sketches of trees and rivers and stars. Perhaps this was where his father's journey had ended, or where it had truly begun. When the wind shifted, he heard it again, the faint hum beneath the rustle of the trees, almost like a lullaby sung by unseen mouths. The river beyond the pines was alive, not with monsters or ghosts, but with memory, ancient, deep, patient. And now it had remembered him too.
Chapter 5. The Return to the Settlement. By the time Samuel and Elias began their journey back, the mist had lifted and the forest shimmered with late morning light. The pines swayed gently in the breeze, their needles catching sunlight like threads of glass. Neither man spoke for a long while. Words felt heavy, unnecessary, after what they had witnessed. The forest had changed in their eyes. Every leaf, every whisper of the wind seemed alive, listening. Even the birds' songs felt different, as if part of a language they could not fully hear. When the clearing of the settlement finally came into view, the familiar smoke of cooking fires curled lazily above the rooftops. Children ran between the cabins, laughter echoing faintly against the wooden fences. It felt distant, too ordinary after the river's strange beauty. Elias clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "Back to the world of men." Samuel smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Does it feel smaller to you?" Elias glanced around. "Maybe we just grew bigger." They passed the outer fields where the autumn harvest had begun. Cornstalks stood tall and brittle, their yellow leaves rustling like paper. Women were gathering herbs near the well, and one of them called out, "You've been gone 3 nights, Mr. Hartwell. Did you find your father's river?" Samuel hesitated. "We found something." The woman's smile faltered at his tone. "Well, I hope it was worth the journey." Inside the settlement hall, the governor, a stout man named Tobias Reed, listened with folded hands as Samuel described their findings. He left out the voices, the carvings, and the way the water refused to touch the skin. He spoke instead of a hidden valley, fertile land, clean river water, and a sense of peace rare in those wild territories. When Samuel finished, Reed leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes thoughtful. "A good discovery. We could build there, a second settlement, perhaps." Samuel's stomach tightened. "Sir, I wouldn't recommend that." Reed raised an eyebrow. "No? And why not?" Samuel hesitated, searching for words. "Because it feels untouched, like it should remain that way. Some places aren't meant for us." Reed's mouth curved into a faint smile. "That's sentiment, Mr. Hartwell, not reason. We came here to build. Every tree cut, every acre tilled. That's progress." Elias shifted uneasily beside him. "Still, sir, maybe Samuel's right. There's something about that river. It's not natural ground." Reed tapped his fingers on the desk. "You're both tired. Rest. We'll send another party to survey it. You've done your duty." They were dismissed without further word. Outside, the sunlight had softened to gold. Samuel watched the smoke rising from chimneys, blending into the amber sky. The air smelled of bread, earth, and pine. Yet he couldn't shake the sense that something had followed them back, something unseen, listening. That night, the dreams came. He dreamed of the river, calm and endless, its surface gleaming under moonlight. He saw the reflection of faces, not his own, not Elias's, but dozens of others flickering like memories in the current. And then, amid them, his father's face appeared, smiling, calling his name. He reached out, but the image dissolved, the water turned dark, and the voices began again, gentle, mournful, rising and falling like a hymn. "Peace," they whispered, "peace." He woke before dawn, his heart heavy with longing. For a moment, he could still hear the hum in his ears, faint, like the echo of the river far away. When Elias came by the next morning, his eyes looked as sleepless as Samuel's. "I heard it too," he said quietly. "In my dreams. The voices." Samuel nodded. "They are not done with us." Elias frowned. "Maybe they never will be." That day the settlement carried on as usual. Children chasing hens, men mending roofs, women boiling herbs, yet everything felt changed. The forest around them seemed closer, the air thicker. The distant sound of the river, once unheard, now drifted faintly on the wind. By evening, as Samuel stood by the palisade, watching the sun dip behind the pines, he saw something that made his breath catch. A thin mist rising in the distance, not from the valley, but from the trees beyond the northern ridge. It shimmered faintly, as if moonlight had spilled through the forest before nightfall. He whispered to himself, "The river remembers." And when he turned back toward the cabins, the sound of the evening bell rang softly through the air, calling families to supper, calling hearts to rest. And yet, even in that simple moment, Samuel knew peace was not something they could command. It was something fragile, borrowed from the land itself. And perhaps, he thought, the land was ready to take it back.